Hello, hello, hello. Dr. Amy Bantham, Dr. Johann Iserthal. Lovely guys. You should meet you guys. Listen, I'm really excited about this one. This is a really big area and I know passion and background from you two. So we're going to get straight into it. Amy, can you connect the dots for me from your early days to where you are today? You've had an amazing career and it's amazing to see what you've also achieved. So help us connect those dots.
Thanks, Grace. I will try not to go back too far in time, but I think it's important to mention that my entry into the health and fitness space started as a group exercise instructor. So I was a management consultant and well, actually, it predates that. I was working at a law firm and we would troop down to the company gym and do group exercise classes together. And I loved the community and the camaraderie. And one day the instructor pulled me aside and said, I think that you would be really good at this. And so I trained and got certified. And then fast forward to when I was a management consultant and I was teaching again during my lunch. And I said, this is what moves me. This is my passion. And so I looked for a position that combined my public policy degree and my love of movement. And I went and I worked with the Health and Fitness Association for over a decade. And while I was doing that, I really recognized that I wanted to do more to really to get people who weren't as active moving. And I wanted to connect the dots between the healthcare community, the medical community, the public health community, and the health and fitness community. And so I got my doctor of public health, really focusing on healthcare providers prescribing exercise.
Right.
Now, my entry into the movement for kids space really came from being a parent and recognizing that my kids weren't moving in school. And so I was sort of the squeaky wheel going in to meet with them. How do we get kids moving more in school? And I really wasn't moving the dial. And so I joined our district wellness committee. And I've now been a volunteer member of that committee for, I think, almost a decade. And we were able to get policies passed that encourage movement before school, in school, after school. And so that was the beginning of my days as a local physical activity community advocate.
And you've joined a number of boards and obviously achieved a lot, and that's where we're connected, right? Through that Physical Activity Alliance board in the US. This is amazing working on there with policy. So we'll come back to that because yeah, there's a lot achieved and a lot more to do. Johan, tell us, connect the dots for us from where you started, because you're one of the few experts who also spent a lot of time in academia and have left academia to come into the real world to tell us more and to bring all of your science to life as well. So this is exciting.
Yeah, I think I went for the real world to the not so real world in academia, back to the real one. Yeah, I think it's a very similar profile to Amy, not in the content, but the trajectory. I was geared to become a PE teacher. Really loved this. I'm still having a massive passion into this, uh, but also felt like 30 kids in a class is amazing, but how can we actually impact
Mm.
more than just the 30 kids? And the trajectory I took to actually do this is through research, working in the kind of behavioral neuroscience space and biomechanics, just to really own into the understanding of how our body is moving, how we move with people, or not moving with people, which is back to this kind of sedentary lifestyle that we all have. So I ended up slightly moving towards very blue sky research, very abstract research for quite some time, did my PhD in this kind of very complex space that doesn't really impact people. So I was really far for where I wanted to be, but that was also what's research happens. You have a niche area and you're diving into this, and before you realize you're in a very small place and you're actually not impacting anybody but the small research community that you're working with. So I moved from France to Belfast in the UK to join the School of Music, where I wanted to understand a bit better about how multisensory uh, information affect people's behavior. So today we are seeing each other, we can hear each other, and how our brain function this way. And all of that was to me just really on into this kind of movement space and how we can impact kids into educational settings. So I left this research position to become a professor in Dublin City University And I stayed there for 15 years, developed my own labs with all my PhD students to really become these academics, these kind of terms that are trying to really get into the two space at the same time. Really using the heavy science that I know, but also always focusing on applying this science directly on kids every day, from nurseries to primary school and secondary schools. So we've done that for a long time, very successfully. Couldn't scale, same thing, write papers as academics do. But so what? There's 120 people in the world that know what you're talking about. Fantastic, great achievements. But everybody tells you it's amazing, but the society doesn't really see it.
Right,
So
right.
Move Ahead is all about that. Really, just left the academic and just to bring this science to and bring them to the partners that really see what we do and together, just to really impact society at scale, which is the whole mission for Move Ahead, really.
And tell us more a little bit, right? Move ahead. So give us the non-so-technical version. Explain us what is Move Ahead and what's it achieving?
So Move Ahead is a very deep tech platform, which is the part that what is that deep tech means is basically we are connecting the dots between what computer vision can offer is extracting movement on kids, where we can apply our science to really understand are they moving the right way? And if so, what is the next pathway for them in terms of motor development?
Mm.
So extracting those very complex data and make them very simple for the kids to say, oh, this action is not well done yet. Okay, I need to do the X. And we do the same thing for the coach with a different complex algorithm to show them what's happening for their kids and the parents. We're translating all the developmental pathways and the part they're struggling, the part they're doing super well to really help them engage with them. So we are connecting, again, your question is connecting the dots, is connecting the dots between the best of technology, the best of what neuroscience can offer, and meeting the kids where they are on the digital platform, that they can engage them actively while still be very educational.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fantastic. And what I know we have, Amy, we talked about this before about kids using phones, and obviously we have a greater challenge of too many kids, too many phones. But this seems like the way going, they're going to use phones anyway, right? So if we can't take it off them, at least we give them tools to use them that are better. And what's nice about this is you have to stand back from the phone as well, right? Because the camera needs to see the full body. So thankfully, it's not here at the face. It is looking at the full body and full body movement. But Amy, give us a little bit of context here of the size of the problem. Because if you're not somebody who's in the research or in the space of physical inactivity for kids, I'm not sure we have a full comprehension of how big a challenge and problem this is. Because it's kind of stark data right now.
Yeah, and when I wrote my book, Move to Live More, which is essentially a guide for families, caregivers, coaches, teachers, fitness professionals for how to get kids moving more, one of my greatest resources was this US physical activity report card for kids and youth. And I say it's US, but it's part of a much bigger, much more international initiative where I think it's over 50 countries take part in this. And it's been done over time, so we can see the change, the movement, and there are a number of indicators. So it's not just overall physical activity
Mhm.
and levels of overall physical activity, but it's sedentary behavior, it is movement in schools, it's movement in community environments. So we're looking at the infrastructure, we're looking at programming, we're looking at policies. It now includes sleep and sleep indicators. And it provides, I think it's 10 or 11 grades on each of those, the extent to which we as a country, as countries, are succeeding in getting kids moving and healthy. And year after year, I think it's done every 2 years, the US is getting a D minus in how we're doing in getting kids moving, which is essentially we have 1 out of 5 kids meeting physical activity guidelines, which is 60 minutes per day of physical activity. And so when I post about this, can we imagine a world where kids come home and say, "Hey, great news, mom and dad, I got a D minus overall,
Right.
and my best grade, I think it's a C, C plus, and that maybe is in sports participation." And the rest of them sort of fall between that. And we are doing very poorly. And these grades really indicate that we're not getting enough kids moving enough.
Yeah. I was looking at data last week for the Irish population for the Ireland Active Conference, and it was shown even in Ireland that we would see ourselves as being a very sporty, active nation, similar to the US in many ways. But the research indicate that 90% of children today can't kick, throw, or run competently. Like that's shocking. And I know, whether you're into sport, whether it's team sports or individual sports or just movement, 90% not being able to move correctly is absolutely shocking, a statistic. And Johan, I know you're working with the IRFU, the Rugby Association here, around building out physical literacy so sports can connect the dots between their elite team, elite players, but the kids at home who are watching, following, hopefully being inspired by their heroes. Tell us a little bit about that, because I know this is not sport specific, even though we have a really great partnership live right now.
Yeah, and for sure. Um, yeah, and I think just give me 1 minute as well, just to connect again those dots
Yeah,
with Amy's point. The lack of physical activity and the 90% of the kids not developing the skill the right way. You could, as part of this conversation, it's nice to see that public health is trying to target the level of physical activity for years and years and years, and everybody keeps failing. Those D minus are still there and is everywhere. It's not getting better. And if you get a C minus, people are starting to tell you, "Oh, we're getting better." It's still absolutely shocking because 40 years ago, it would not have been even a questions to be discussed. So we are creating new questions, new problems for the young generations from all the different lifestyle that we are living in. The part that I was trying to make quite controversially in terms of like research applications or trying to have different angles, to me, there's something core about if you're competent at something, the likelihood of engaging in the competency part that you are now realizing, oh, I'm pretty good at this, is way higher. And asking the kids to be more and more active, to me, is not what the right angles to actually tap into increasing activity, is asking the root cause of that.
right,
To me, there's two. One is the competency parts. And I answer your question about the RFU because that's what they really see. But also there's a confidence part that is one of the core pillars for the physical literacy. So
right.
really young kids, they don't have a problem with the confidence whatsoever. 5, 6, 7 years old, they're happy cookie. Life is amazing for most of and they engage because they think it's fun and they don't really have this psychological impact yet on what they can do. Comes to teenage years, mainly for girls, is a very different kettle of fish altogether.
Yeah,
My argument when I went to the RFU for the rugby project matched very nicely the thing they see every day on a rugby pitch where the kids, there's two parts. One, there's not as many coming, so in terms of grassroots engagement. If you had 100% of the population going for this, now it's 60. So the loss is less kids coming. And when you go up the age groups, the retention rate is also dropping.
right.
So the grassroots level is lower and then they drop out, which again go back to this competency and confidence element that together are the recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
So now what we're trying to do with them is to bring everything back on his head, saying, okay, let's increase that competence level as soon as we can. Let's have fun, engage, be confident, and hope that that will stimulate them to stay longer active for life. Not the next, national team hero. Hopefully, some will come from this,
yeah.
but as an organization, they felt the responsibility also to impact society and not thinking, oh, who's going to be my next hero for my national team? Obviously, it's part of their reasoning,
Sure.
but is not part of their decision process exclusively, which is quite unique, I'd say, because not too many people see this way.
And the data, do you see any data differently? You mentioned the difference in girls and dropout there. Do you see anything different? Do we have enough research, like at core level, physical literacy for girls versus boys? Is the technology built any differently? What way does
It's
it work?
it's Yeah, it's a physiological kind of an onset, really. Puberty kicks in earlier for girls mainly. So, and we also know we made always a joke, oh, those girls are way more mature than the boys. It's so the reasoning part, the aspect of my body is changing, as also alongside my cognitions, is making me anxious, making me aware of things that I was not aware before.
Right.
All of that combined with parents too busy, uh, the roads are not as secured, technology affordances led people to do more on other devices and other like piece of technology that are also extremely good.
Mhm.
And it's a combination of all those factors. So you can't really say what is the cause because it's a multifactorial cause. At least targeting one or two is
Yeah.
one way to enter these things, and together we can solve this problem. But nobody has an answer really on his own.
And this is the nice thing of you, what you guys are doing is tackling the problem, not just from the research so we know and understand the problem, but bringing solutions to the table. And like if we're looking at 90%, of kids need to be more competent in skills and, 80% and 90% need to be more active, more consistently. We kind of need a lot more solutions, right? We need to look at every single part of society, whether it's at home, whether it's at school, whether it's traveling to school, whether it's in sport, whether it's, and all the different facets. And it's an interesting one. Johan, with the rugby in particular, how many skills are part of that, physical literacy skills? Because it's not that many, right? But
So yeah, like the if you want to have a rounded overview on kids' performance levels, um, measuring 5 or 6 skills per core pillars is important and sufficient. A core pillar in the world of motor skills is locomotions, is one of the core movements. So it's like running, skipping, jumping. Then you
Mhm.
have object manipulation skills, which have everything to do with like kicking a soccer ball or bouncing a ball or catching a ball. And then you have the third one, which is everything to do with balancing and stability skills. That those three pillars leads to sports specific skills, but at the basis, that's what we are doing. So to answer very specific your questions, 6 times 3, less than 20 core fundamental skills are the recipe that really leads kids to feel competent, to then can engage in different sports and be competent at them.
I think that's really important for those that aren't, biomechanics and in the weeds of the knowledge. Even though there's 8,000 sports, and there's many, many, many different movement patterns
Yeah,
between all those sports. It actually only boils down to, you said, is three core pillars of movement, and then like 20 skills ultimately. If we get those competent, then any sport, can be an option for a kid and
yeah,
for adults to enjoy for life.
absolutely.
Is what we want to be able to drive to. Amy, when you look at, and you've been doing obviously the Physical Activity Alliance and the policy work there, give us a little bit more context of how we're looking at public policy of challenging this, because technology and the route that Johan gone down is one way of tackling this, but there's many already routes in play and there's many solutions and success metrics, even though we're still on a D minus and that report card. But what's working? Give us some with that context. Public policy to me is huge, and I know we do have funding, but we've more to do with the more funding, possibly less funding, more to do.
I'm writing down your question because I will get to what's working, but I want to connect the dots to something Johan
Great.
said first because I think looking at movement in kids through a physical literacy lens is something that absolutely changed the way that I think about what we are doing as researchers and as practitioners. Johan, you really very carefully pointed out these pillars of physical literacy and the ability, the foundational skills, absolutely critical, and layering on sport specific skills, but having those age appropriate, developmentally appropriate skills so key. And what role can we as parents and coaches and fitness professionals play in helping to develop those skills? um, and the confidence, such an important piece. As the parent of twin 12-year-old girls, I see it every day as we drive home from a field hockey game, from a cross country meet. confidence is key, and that's why I'm always so excited to lift up and feature and spotlight organizations that are working specifically around building confidence in girls. And I recently interviewed Girls on the Run International, and they, to your point, Johann, they focus on girls in grades 3 through 5. And because that's how early the research shows that confidence in girls begins to slip.
Age is that, Amy, for those of us outside the US?
Yeah, so that is age 8 to 10, I
Right.
would
Yeah.
say. And so that's where they start, and they work on empowering girls and building confidence, and ultimately they help them in developing life skills and running skills, and it culminates in them running or walking a 5K. And so that ability piece, that confidence piece, and then that desire piece, the desire to be physically active for life. And that's where I spend a lot of my time when we're thinking about how we frame exercise as movement, how we support people in physical activity behavior change, in finding movement that they love, where people say, I hate to run. Okay, don't run. Let's support you in finding movement that you love to do. But dancing is an exercise. Dancing, if you love to dance and dancing gets you moving and taps you into a community, that's wonderful. That and people are meant to are feel as if that's not the right choice. It is absolutely the right choice. So supporting people in those right choices. So I just wanted to emphasize, Johann, what you had brought out, which I think are really, really key points. So, Grace, to answer your question about what's working, I really think about physical activity behavior change from both a top down and a bottom up approach. And I spend my life as a researcher. Johann, I had to laugh when you were talking about as a researcher working in this really, really small world and that only people in that world know about. And I spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, how do we build bridges? How do we connect the dots, taking the research and actualizing it and implementing it, and that my role as a public health practitioner. So thinking, and my example of how I got into getting kids moving as a local physical activity community advocate, that is very bottom up work. It started off as very lonely because I was a single voice, and I joined together with a committee and joined together with others in the community who really had more power and influence than I did as a sole parent, joining together with the PE teachers, with the district wellness coordinator, with getting the school board engaged, getting superintendents and principals engaged. And so joining together, so that bottom up approach. And then what we're doing, Grace, to your point about the Physical Activity Alliance, again, not being a one isolated entity, but truly being a coalition of organizations. We have 20 organizations on the board. They're all engaged in physical activity work in many different aspects of it. We have athletic trainers, we have physical therapists, we have fitness professionals, we have technology at the table. We have healthcare at the table. We have the Health and Fitness Association at the table. We have the Y at the table, some more community-based solutions, and bringing all those organizations together. So when we're talking with policymakers about policy changes that we need to make in order to move that dial, move up from a D minus, not, Johann, to your point, to a C or a C plus. That's still a bad grade. We need to truly move the dial. And the data is working against us when we think about all different, it's not just one sector, it's all the sectors working together. And it's when we think about the fact that a generation ago, half of kids in the US walked or biked to school, and now it's 1 out of 10.
Mm.
And we're not going to solve that just as physical activity organizations. We need to be working with infrastructure groups, with city planners, with Department of Education. We need to be working at federal, state, and local level to solve that. So to me, what's working is coalitions are working. To me, what's working is reaching across sectors. So it's not just sports and physical activity. We're talking with transportation, education, and community rec, and so getting all different stakeholders at the table.
Amy, can I jump on this before Grace asking you new questions? Because I think it's fascinating just to like even the word you're using, you say like it's working. So I think I could not agree more. Like on paper, I can see this is the only way to make it work to bring this alliance together. But is it actually working? Because from what I can see, not being in the US, it doesn't work. Like it's the ingredients are in place almost, but nobody's making cookie out of those ingredients is there. We are almost waiting for somebody just to actually have enough influence or power making to blend those ingredients to actually make it happen. What's your kind of vision from inside? Is it actually working?
Yeah, I think one thing that's working is when we're talking with policymakers. Before it was, okay, who are you? What do you represent? Oh, we just had another organization working in the physical activity space that was just in here, and they were talking about something that was completely different. And maybe we weren't saying different things, but they were confused about the messaging, the priorities, and who we are. So I think that is an important piece that's working. I would also say that one thing that's working, we have really focused our attention on our It's Time to Move initiative, and that is making physical activity assessment, prescription, and referral a standard of care in the US healthcare system.
Yeah.
And so I guess over 5 years ago, I did my 1 year of doctoral research on one healthcare system that was doing just this. And really trying to understand what were barriers to this being a standard of care. And that was a one-off. And now 5 years later, we are actually making strides to get a HL7, a health level
Mm.
7 approved standardized measure, a standardized clinical measure for physical activity assessment, prescription referral, getting it into the electronic health record
Yeah.
system. So it's not just one healthcare system. 2 years from now, every electronic health record system will have to have this standardized measure for aerobic physical activity, for muscle conditioning, and it will
Yeah.
have to be a field in the electronic health record. And now we're working on implementing it so that healthcare systems across the whole US are using this field and using this standardized implementation guide that we've put together. So I would say that is one area that we've been able to make very tangible progress.
The nice part about that as well is that it can be implemented globally because a lot of the systems used are global systems, like Epic and Cerner being two of the big ones. They're typically dominant here in Europe as well. I appreciate there's plenty of different EMRs, but if it's consistent across the US EMRs, thankfully that those big players operate internationally as well. So we'll see it come in our direction. And it is exciting because to your point, if your doctor asks you the question, then the chances of there being an actual follow-up if the answer is no is just higher if the question isn't asked in the first place. Right. So
That's right. And we know that in about half of office visits in the previous 12 months, the question wasn't even asked.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
really putting a path forward. And there's a pediatric physical activity vital sign, and so really implementing this for kids as well. And of course, this is just one sector. This is
Yes.
connecting healthcare to A second sector, the more community rec, sport and fitness sector, but those are important sectors to connect. We know exercises medicine is focused on connecting the clinic and the community, and then bringing in transportation, bringing in education, and all the sectors of the National Physical Activity Plan. There are 11 sectors, and really charting a path forward there. I'm not all, I am very glasses half full on
Yeah.
that. I truly believe I find the physical activity report card with the D minus, I find that soul crushing. And I am always thinking about ways that we can move the dial there because you're right, we are not succeeding.
Yeah. And I think and again, it's nobody's fault really, but it's nobody's fault, but also everyone's fault. Because
Yeah.
everybody can contribute to their own personal health and to their family's health if they want to. There's different ways to do this now. Not easy. It was easier, I think, in the past where our life were slightly different. But I think is what comes as well is like the core the people that we trust are always, your lawyers, your doctors. Those guys aren't educated at all to understand that society has changed. Being active is important because it's not something that is part of their own ethos, on their own education. It was not a question that they used to ask in the past. So all of a sudden, you're asking physicians that have done like practicing medicine for 30 years to shift to a brand new type of questioning to understand what's going on for their clients and their patients. And it's not easy. Uh, They are the one that are seeing the entire populations. Like, so doctor sees everybody once a year at least, so everyone would have seen one that could advocate for those kind of changes to happen.
Right.
But it's not something easy for them either. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of
oh, go ahead.
no, 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 sorry, I was finished.
No, I talk about this a lot when I present because clinicians, healthcare providers, particularly general practitioners, so in a primary care setting, they are the most trusted source of physical activity information, which is really incredible given how little training they have in physical activity. And health and fitness professionals are somewhere in the middle. Like people are asked about their level of trust in health and fitness professionals. It's about 44% answer that they trust health and fitness professionals for physical activity information. So, what I talk about and what I work on and what I dedicate my life to is how can we harness the fact that healthcare providers are trusted sources of information? How can we educate them? How can we raise awareness? How can we support them in leveraging that trust? And then how can we build trust in health and fitness professionals who do have that knowledge and do have that training?
And to add another piece of the LOL aspect on the people we trust, our children trust their teachers more than they trust their parents for many things. If you ask them, oh, my teacher told me this, and it has to be true because the teacher said it, and would be similar to the clinicians. They are not equipped correctly to deal with this new generation of kids that are clearly not moving enough, not developing the right skills, themselves don't even know if they are doing the right thing or the wrong things, and we can't make them accountable for this. Simply for the fact they have to teach like 12 subjects every day. So why would you be the best person to actually educate those kids, knowing that your own training is not matching the current status of society? So whatever you've learned in the past, that has to be reconsidered. And how do you reconsider that as part of your profession when it's not your expertise? So we're asking them the impossible task, really. And it goes back to Grace. 90% can't do certain things. That us being able to measure it and interpret the data. I mean, you can't ask a primary school teacher to measure
Right.
and interpret the data. It's not their job. Uh,
That's it.
and it was something, Grace, that they didn't even have to consider 15 years ago. You just make people just play aside. Any type of activity, you will develop those skills through play and through encouragement and like mimicking your brothers and doing the same as the 12 years old when you're 6 is enough to develop those fundamental skills to the level that is sufficient to feel confidence, going back to what we were discussing before, to engage in physical activity for life, for wellness purposes and well-being aspects. So it's those two big pillars of society, teachers and doctors. We
Yeah.
trust them every day, and they don't have the right tools in hand yet.
That- It's a really interesting point. I've done a number of research projects with different stakeholders in school environments, thinking about what are barriers to implementing in-school physical activity interventions. And often it's time, it's weather, it's essentially power and decision making and the ability to make the time to include the physical activity intervention. And I often find that a winning combination for a successful in school physical activity intervention is a classroom teacher who can make the time and space, and a PE teacher who has the expertise. And working together, they can be that dynamic duo.
Yeah, we've done a lot of like kind of interventions, let's call it, where we come in with the expertise and we had to actually force the teachers to look and come with us when we were delivering sessions and then say, the next session actually copy paste, do the same thing again. And it's back to the kids' confidence, bringing the teachers up the scratch on what they can do, make them understanding that is not that difficult when you have the core recipes. And they do magic because they are so creative, so knowledgeable. They know the kids so well. When they have two or three core ingredients, they deliver the next sessions better than us when we were coming as experts because they are extremely good at dealing with the kids better than anyone else. And that we did this quite a lot. And that's kind of a way to expand this knowledge across the schools. The question that we always have is like, it's great to do this in pockets. And back to your point, Amy, as well, like, we're doing such a small piece of support to those schools that we are working with. How do we do this as a nation? And nobody has really cracked that yet. And that's something I wish we could try to do. We move ahead, trying to educate at scale the teachers or give them the right tools in some way so they can really, really see value in the technology and using it every day without us being there, because otherwise it can't scale, which is always going back to the same problem.
That's a great point. When we're talking about leadership in the world of physical activity, we don't typically include teachers, right? Because to your point, they're not trained sufficiently, to be able to do this on a continuous basis. But yet they actually have more power than anyone else. So we need to join those dots, connect those dots together, where teachers are given the tools to build their competence as well as their confidence to do it at scale. So that's a call to action, that we need teachers to become literally the leaders of the future for
Yeah,
physical activity.
yeah, it's an important point. I call them the linchpin
Mm.
for physical activity interventions in schools, and they a lot of my research has focused on really motivation, like what are your pain points and how can physical activity interventions help solve those pain points. And I think that particularly post pandemic it was learning loss and it was supporting kids with emotional regulation and supporting teachers with classroom management, and the more they saw physical activity as a tool that would help solve those pain points, the more motivated and interested they were to helping to support and implement those solutions. So that was certainly a successful path forward in terms of really, again, leveraging the trust, Johan, to your point, leveraging the power, and then pairing them with someone who has the expertise and skills.
And most teachers are female. So if we have a more inactive female girls, and then we have, as you mentioned, the diversity or the changes, the body changes happen around teenage years, and girls drop off out of sport earlier, potentially, then we're heading into another bigger problem, right? Because lots of these young girls who aren't confident in sport and competent in the skills are going to end up being the teachers, and hence the cycle continues. So if we don't sort this out at a very young age, we end up having, the knock-on effect that in 2, 3, 4 decades,
Yeah.
Time as well.
It's already like that's where I think the public health be like starting to realize, oh my God, now we have one generations of future parents that don't have the skill set. So why would they bring the kids outside on a Saturday morning to do something? Like
Right,
if you clearly can't kick a ball as an adult, you don't really want to do that with your kids because it's not something that you can do. It's not something that you're naturally inclined to do. So you're not bringing them in. So like it's getting worse and worse. The role model is gone. Your brothers and sisters are there, the parents are there. Again, you're back to your point, Grace. The teachers themselves won't have that natural ability to do that because themselves don't have the competence
right,
or then for the confidence. It's pretty hard to teach something that you're not competent in
right.
some way. So I think it's very, very important to actually do something. They, I mean, you all know those kind of quotations, like the current kids will potentially be the first generation to die younger than their own parents. As a human, as a society, it never happened ever. And the first time we have those things, and the root cause is not a monster pandemic. It's something that you actually can control extremely easily. Uh, but obviously, it's easier than said and done. Society has changed so much that now it's hard to do things. Back
Right.
to Amy's point, people used to cycle and walk to school. They don't anymore. People used to do some exercise after work, but now they're finishing too late or it's too dangerous in the streets. There's a lot of factors that are against everybody to make it happen. Uh, you have now pockets of the society that's the opposite, that are never eat as well as ever, are never been as active as their previous parents, but is 2% of
Right.
rich families that can afford the time and the money to actually do this because it becomes another problem is being able to afford to access to those solutions that are not that easy accessible now. If I don't have the skill sets, I'm rather just go to a coach that at least he knows what's going on. But that means it's at a certain time at a certain cost. And those two factors are big barriers to entry in physical activity. Your local park with 2 trees is an amazing goal to play soccer. And that's enough for everybody in the past. Not anymore. And that's where we're having a big, big problem.
And we're seeing increased funding, I mean, in pretty much every country that I'm aware of, into sports and sports clubs. But go if you
Yeah.
wind the clock back a little bit, if kids are incompetent at the basic skills in school, they're not going to join the sports. Hence, we're kind of putting funding into something that's possibly not growing at the same rate. Or do we see the same level of funding going into schools for physical activity? I don't know, Amy.
Yeah, I'm laughing because in the US I'm laughing because I'm crying. I mean, we are quite literally peeling away physical education. We are peeling away recess. We are not making the time for brain breaks in classrooms. And I talk with and I interview a lot of people who work in this space, and schools are the most equitable place to reach
Yeah.
kids with movement interventions. I want to make a point about role modeling because, Johan, I think this is a really, really key point. I want to tie it in, Grace, into something you said about frontline workers. So, role models for healthcare providers, teachers, parents, those who are physically active themselves are most likely to recommend it to their patients, encourage it in their students, encourage it in their children. So, we have an entire generation who doesn't have the skills, the schooling, the awareness, the education, the practice of it. We are passing that down. And when kids are young, their parents are the greatest influence over their physical activity patterns. When they age, it's their peers. But I think to the point that you both have been making, if they don't have those foundational skills, by the time we get to the point where their peers are their greatest influence, they're playing catch up, right? And that impacts ability, it impacts confidence, and it impacts desire, all negatively. Grace, you started to talk about teachers being primarily female, and I think this is I think we can make a comparison to the health and fitness sector, where many of the frontline workers in the health and fitness sector are women, group fitness instructors, personal trainers. And when we move up in the sector to CEO level, when we follow the money, the private equity money in the health and fitness sector, it's much more male
Mhm.
dominated, but the frontline workers are women. So I think the point about role modeling and the comparisons with teachers, parents, healthcare providers, and now fitness professionals, how important it is to have that role modeling piece.
Just shows a little bit of focus can go an awful long way, right? To help in tackling a problem where those that at the front line have the opportunity to tackle it. So yeah, I mean this is the beauty in many ways of having the gender balance conversation because the way society is just not, equal in all areas. There needs to be a strategy to focus on where's the biggest bang for buck to see the biggest change and the biggest impact. And there's lots to spin around here. Johan, you want to come in?
Oh no, I just wanted to come in as well on there's you mentioned in passing there's lots of money being pumped into sports in most countries. And I think it's also part of the problem. Is like it's not a preventative medicine approach at all. When you pump money to sports, you're assuming that people you're making an assumption that people can do the sports. And the point I'm trying to make is like we know they can't anymore do the sports. They are basically can't do fundamental skills. That means they can't do the sport specific things. So you're pumping money there to attract talent, and it will work. So for sure, they will attract some talents there. But again, we are missing mission as a society to have a healthy nations.
Yeah.
Sport is one way to bring people into being physically active, but leisure is not necessarily sports focused. It can be any sort of activity. Going for a hike, it's not sports per se, but is extremely healthy to do this and is super easy to do that. So there's a mismatch there, and had a recent chat with people very high up in the USOPC, the Olympic Committee, and it's the main focus. Every 2 years is a Winter or Summer Olympics, and they want to represent the nations. But all those decision process is geared toward this very big thing that you see. The next World Cup is in the US, and I tell you, Grace, there is millions pumped there because everybody benefits from marketing, from sponsors, and everything. But at the bottom, those kids that clearly can't access to any soccer clubs, they will still not have access to them
Right.
because there's a mismatch between the grassroots and the impact you want at the basis all the way down to the national team that will be the one at the forefront. And that disconnecting or connecting the dots, so back to your 1 hour ago question, is that not too many people have connected the dots. And there's like invisible line between Amy wanted to do things on public health, so that's for everyone, and that elite decision that drives feasibility and the nation's strength in sports. And that's very, very hard to connect those people together.
Right. More to be done because the Physical Activity Alliance, that coalition mentality is absolutely needed. And it does impact the spending and where it's spent and how it's spent. But yeah, more to happen because as you said, there's capitalist engines that are happening in parallel that are operating on a different track a little bit.
Yeah,
And
and I think that this debate rages on in the US as well, thinking through PE and recess and movement in schools, and then towns or city supported more recreational movement versus the pay to play, very expensive clubs that are inaccessible to many for cost reasons. And Johan, you're making a really important point about for skill reasons. And the fact that, just as I said, by the time that kids are at the point where they're being influenced by peers around movement, they're playing catch up because they don't have those foundational skills. And so more and more we have this divide. And Grace, to your point about girls dropping out of sports younger, they're dropping out between 9 and 13. Boys are also dropping out of sport. And so what's the alternative? I spend a lot of time focusing on policies that will support every kid in seeing themselves as an athlete, however you define athlete. An athlete could be a non-competitive learning how to play badminton. It could be making that connection between taking a walk in the woods and feeling less anxiety and stress. And so expanding our view of athletics beyond this very narrow elite performance lens.
Yeah. And if we look at, Johann, I know you've been focusing on like that companies and organizations who are profit driven, who are looking at elite sports, but again, fan engagement.
Yeah.
So like rugby is that one of the one we talked about, and there's other sports and other organizations who are looking at how early can we engage young kids, young fans to be
Yeah.
physically literate, because that is first, it makes commercial sense as well. I appreciate these are business organizations who are profit driven, but you can do both if they do it as well, right?
I think you can do both because I think, like the must have versus nice to have, I think those organizations, what I want to change the way they think is like it's a must have to be seen to do the right things because it will transform your brand awareness and how people respect who you are as a person. For sure, it's for profit, fair, but you can do for profit in a good way. And that also brings way more revenue down the line if people associate your brand to, okay, they're doing their best. It's not easy, everybody's trying, but at least they are the one making a difference. Um, I think we're gonna find those people, and I think it will be kind of hopefully it's like a snowball effect. At the moment, we're still looking for these individuals and those organizations that see it. Like, I want to make a difference, or I'm the first mover advantage. People, that's one way, or they can see I want to have a legacy for my company when I retire that have made changes that has been impacting societies. Some groups do that. Some group is getting there.
Right.
My bet is on the health insurance people that has clearly an advantage to actually make their customers as healthy as possible because they're going to do less and less claim. And they are getting very quickly now thinking, okay, this is the preventative medicine route that I might want to take. They are sponsoring sports. They want to be seen doing that. More to come there, I think.
Yeah.
Um, watch that space in my sense in this because they are also part of our ecosystem. Everyone who see the teacher and the doctors, everybody will be facing at some point some sort of health issue that tie up to those giants that are driving force in countries. So they are the one that will change society potentially as well.
How young can your platform work with children?
From the age of like 3, 4, it
3, 4.
works. Yeah. So that's the thing, and we're trying to. I want to do more with the like nursery staff as well because it's again they are facing so many challenges. Yeah, just to help them, really, just to see what's in front of them and tie up with all the tools they have in hands. They just don't know how to use them, and the bridge is not too far, I think. So hope to do more with them in the future.
So you're both consistently going up the stream, right? And how do we go back upstream in relation to solving for it from birth as well as the infrastructure around nearly every part of society? And we've got to continue doing that. I mean, at 90%, of kids, we've got a big enough problem. So even if, every organization, every sports organization, decided to lean into it, there's still enough population to capture a significant new, fan engagement share, right? And to your point of there's plenty of merchandise, there's plenty of games, there's plenty of heroes to be generated. There's an awful big problem. So, thankfully, there's very little competition in this side of things. It's just do it with your sport and your club and your brand, and it's a winner-winner. In
For
some,
everyone, I think.
I mean, obviously, the healthcare doctors that are getting probably the ones that are losing out here, but in every country that varies, right? So, less people in healthcare would be great, and it would solve an awful lot more problems than it caters for. Go back a second to you guys and your careers. You have, been extensive and been impactful in not only following from the research right through to implementation. And the two of you, what was the word you used, Johan? Pracademics? Is that
Yeah.
correct? I love it. I'm going to use that word, hashtag pracademics. But you've both done both sides of this. So it's research driven, and then it's implementation, and it's still evaluation of the implementation to further feed more research and more impact. If you're looking at the people that are, hopefully following your leadership, what are the lessons you guys would be sharing with them so that they can avoid any pitfalls or save themselves time? What would you look at? We need more people focused on this. If you're in college doing X, Y, and Z, whether it's kinesiology or sports science or anything else, give me some lessons for these people so that we can hopefully leverage the new people coming out of universities at a much faster rate. So they can able to follow your lead and we can move some mountains.
I'm asked this when I talk about my return to school mid-career. I went back and got my doctorate mid-career,
Yeah.
and I was doing exciting, wonderful work. I was working with the health and fitness industry, helping them start and implement a foundation, which really helped open up the sector to working with people with disease and disability. And I wanted to do more of that, more around making physical activity accessible. So I was very intentional about what degree I chose and what area I chose to focus on. I got a DRPH, which is different from a PhD. It is a practitioner and leadership focused degree. And so I did research, and so I think research is critical. We need to build the evidence base, but we also need to translate the evidence base. And as a practitioner, I spend all of my time thinking about what I think is the theme of this podcast, and which is the theme of Move to Live More, the company I founded, which is around building bridges among sectors, among connecting the dots. And so a lot of the work that I do is building bridges between research and practice. And so I was very intentional about where I focused my time. It was important to me to build the evidence base, but also to translate it. And it was important around credibility to have that training and that credential. So I would really encourage people to think about what their end goal is. And I think Johann said this quite well, is really thinking about scaling and bringing about, to me, a focus of mine was bringing about large scale change. I didn't want to just impact, like a personal trainer impacts one person, group exercise. I have 35 people in my classes. I wanted to change the entire system, which supported people in changing their physical activity behavior. And so I was very focused on large scale change. I even took courses as part of my degree that were called large scale change.
Right.
And then being a very small women-owned small business in occupying a very small corner of the world and needing to be bigger and have more impact, and joining a coalition, joining the board of the Physical Activity Alliance was really important to achieving that large scale change goal.
Your breadth of knowledge, Amy, is quite powerful. And I was lucky enough, obviously, to work with you as part of EXI. I mean, you're very strategic in being able to support businesses as well, of figuring out where to focus on and where to lean into, and your ability to support organizations. So, I mean, just to make sure we're not losing out the track as well, there's individuals that you support and there's organizations that you support, whether it's at a strategy level, established business or a startup. And again, likewise, there's lots of kind of in-betweens that you're working on. And it's been powerful. And I'm privileged to have worked with you. I'm also privileged to see some of the work that you're doing. So yeah, your leadership is amazing. And if anyone's not following you, I'm like, just follow Amy. She's doing amazing work.
Thank
Amazing.
you, Grace. No, I appreciate that. And I think the background, my background in strategic consulting and really thinking about how I support national organizations to get people moving. And so it could be program design and evaluation. It could be simply laying out a strategy that is going to reach into communities across the entire nation. It could be implementing a system that connects not one healthcare provider to one health and fitness center, but connects providers across the world to trusted community-based resources where they can send their patients. So really, really thinking about that strategically on a very large scale.
And again, money to be made for organizations and kids to be impacted positively. So it's a win-win. And it's, yeah, well done. Johann, what are your lessons?
Um, I think like as when I was a professor, I saw a lot of those like young 18 years old coming in where themselves believe you know something, and the part of the academic role is to really just further educate those students. After 4 years, they leave with a big new luggage that they can really impact the world with their knowledge and their own personal understanding of what they can do. So as part of like bringing awareness to their own potential. And I think the lesson I think keep telling them is like we all have in our pockets those mobile phones that are one of the most beautiful piece of technology that we human being have ever created, and we are using them to send WhatsApp messages and like pictures, which is ridiculously stupid to do that when you have it's like a Ferrari in your pocket and you're using it as like the most basic car you can imagine to have. So I was showing them that there is a potential in your hands every day that you actually don't even consider, and you don't even trying to ask yourself the questions, what can I do with this device that actually could be life changing for yourself if you're really selfish, or how can you use this to really make a difference? And that was something quite kind of striking in conversation where people actually don't think. And I think that's the biggest lesson to me was like become a decision maker and a forward thinker. So that will make changes. And just don't just sit down in a lecture room, listen. That's not active learner. And I think is without making the analogy to physical activity, but being an active learner is actually engaging cognitively and physically into what you're learning. And I think to me, it was more important to teach them those soft skills that with those one, you can just transform the world. If you don't have them, then you just become one of those people that have, again, those phone in the pockets and a degree. Everybody has a phone and a degree, but no, like really few people actually make a difference in the society. So that's kind of the mission that I had. Well, beyond the content that you deliver is the next level, I think.
And your customer base, Johan, going back to move ahead for a second, your customer base can be teachers, it can be sports clubs, it can
Yes.
be ultimately businesses, it can be parents, right?
Yes, it
And it
can be
can
exactly. Yeah.
be individuals. So the beauty here is, as you said, everyone has a phone. Unfortunately, there's pros and cons with that. And I know
Yeah.
I'm biased towards iPhone as an ex-Apple person, but we have a lot more we can use with it. I agree. And that's an
Yeah,
important
and I think is again, and who knows what you can do with the phone? Like we've discovered that AI is the everything is we should use now. But people working in AI are laughing, thinking, "I've doing this for 15 years. I know that." But all of
yeah.
a sudden, everybody think, "Yeah, this is what you need to be using." Like we all know that for 15 years. It's the same joke as Meta. Like all of a sudden, it was all Meta everywhere. I was like, "This is a joke." Like these people are. So it's again, it's there. And is the next piece, it will be the exact same kind of, it becomes fashion to actually say, oh, this look, wow, what? Oh, you're not using it. Oh my God, you're really behind. It's like, are you serious? It's been there for so long already. Think about what you have and just use it.
And you've gamified this as well. I know obviously fun is a crucial part of kids being active. And as we pointed out, being active from 2, 3, 4 is the starting blocks. That's where we have to do it. I know you've built an engine around it being playful, it being gamified, it being enjoyable. So we can turn something that can be negative, right, and the screens and the phones that are always on, into something much more powerful. So the physical technology is already out there everywhere, and the software is developed and available. So we should be kind of helping to tie these dots
Yeah.
together.
Oh,
And
again, and it's back to this. And I think the word we are trying to show parents, because ultimately it's the parents that are the decision maker. We can talk as long as we want about the
as
teachers.
Amy pointed out, yeah.
Yeah. So active screen time, it's something that seems to be a big mismatch at the moment, but I think that's what I'm really want to push more now. You can use those phones positively, you actively engaging with technology and be educational at the same time. So all of a sudden, your mobile phone that has this negative connotation you can flip this on his head, saying, no, no, you can use this positively for two reasons. Make the kids active while using it, and they are still learning, which is, as a parent, you really want your kids to learn as much as possible, you know? So you give them this opportunity with this piece of technology that really tick two core boxes of their kids' development. So
Mm.
that's the kind of the messaging we're trying to push and to show people to think differently. Back to my point 2 minutes ago, because people always tells you, oh, I'm working in an innovation unit in Siemens. You're actually innovating nothing. You're reinventing the same thing, changing two or three parameters. That's the innovation because
Right.
it's not a
Your
risky
phones, I
innovation.
mean, right? Phones
Yeah,
and
it's a slight, you're moving the dial. Yes, for sure. Up, hands up, you do move the dial a little bit, but it's not disruptive. And we are disrupting the field with this kind of like forward thinking. Not easy because you need forward thinkers as well to recognize those kind of things. And thanks for having me on those kind of podcasts because it's you need to disseminate those kind of like conversations to as many people as we can uh, to hopefully make a change.
well, it's bringing the old and new here together, right? We're saying that we've had the evidence and the science around physical literacy and movement for decades. We've no argument that everyone should be active. We've no argument that teachers have a massive influential power, but also haven't got the skill sets necessarily. So we need to give teachers more tools. Likewise, parents, we're saying your parents are very influential, but likewise may or may not have the confidence and competence themselves. So likewise, more tools. And we be able to give people, I suppose, the confidence and the tools to go, how do I build my confidence? How do I build my competence at the same time? So we've a lot of pieces here to pull together. Um, because last question for you guys, as you are two massive leaders in the space, disrupting and bringing together the science and pulling it through all parts of society, look at the industry at large. Who are the emerging or established leaders that you'd like to call out? Because we need to continue this conversation, continue the ripple effect of pretty much everyone being aware and understanding what tools are in our fingertips and who are the leaders that we can ultimately tap into. So who are the emerging leaders you guys would like to call out? Johan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I want to bring it like I was like when you're asking me, it make me think because I had something in my head, but I think it's someone else.
And I know you're in a very male dominated space as well in tech, and I know your team is male
Yeah, no, I
dominated.
think in that space, I think is the tech leaders, because I did mention like Siemens 2 seconds ago, is a woman called Joan Mulvihill that is absolutely, to my knowledge, like one of the most like forward thinker that I've seen, bringing everything together. The societal change, the technology as a driver, while keeping another piece that we haven't discussed today is like art as the forefront of our legacy to the world. For things we are making that doesn't exist, it's called art, and she has managed to put together from a practical manner, philosophical manner, words and arts together while working in one of the biggest corporates in the planet because they're thinking to do digital transformations. And again, back to my joke earlier on, yeah, it's easy to say, oh, I have a digital transformation unit, but actually, are you transforming anything or reinventing the wheel? And that's those kind of person. I think Johan for this is, to me, one of the best leaders to put forward.
And it's Joan Mulvihill, is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Great call out. I don't know her, so she'll definitely be on my list to go target and talk to. Love it. Amy.
One of the beauties of running my own business is being able to live my mission every day. And when I put together my podcast, which I'm now in my fifth year of, I'm just about to hit 125 guests. That to me, I was when I started it, really thinking about creating a community of thought leaders in the physical activity and youth sports space. And it was very important to me, and I have followed through on this to elevate the voices of women. So more than 50% of my guests are women. And Grace, you've been a guest on my show, and I love the work that you're doing with the collective, which is really around lifting other women up. And so certainly anyone who looks at any of the leaders, particularly the more than 50% women leaders who've come on the Move to Live More podcast, I could pick any one of those
Right.
to highlight. I want to highlight one in the spirit of women lifting other women up. Janet Olmsted, she's out of Canada. She spends a lot of time focused on something I care deeply about, which is reframing exercise as play and really honing in on the fun and the joy. And she very much looks at the world as her playground. And she's a wonderful role model. She models what she preaches, she coaches others, and she lifts other women up. When I said to her, I'm thinking about writing a book. And she'd written a book. I interviewed her about her book. I read her book. And she said, how can I support? How can I help? So really thinking through how to be a mentor for others. So I would list Janet for those many
Great
reasons.
call out. I love what she's doing. I've also read her book. It's possibly here on the shelf behind me, but it's great. Yeah, we'll connect that as part of the follow-up to this podcast as well, because it is worth it. And it all comes back to play. Yeah, if we can continue that mentality throughout life, we'd be in a lot better situation, and more happy, right? As well. That would be great. Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate we could talk about this all day, and I know there's lots of parts of the challenge, of the problem that we didn't get to talk about today, as well as lots of part of the solution. But we will continue this conversation because it is essential that we help to solve and continue to help to solve the challenge of physical inactivity, especially in kids, especially looking at some of the differences of gender we have as well, of teachers being mainly female, as well as parents being quite influential, and possibly the gap between women and girls in sport. I mean, there's so many factors, as you said, Johann, it's multifactorial. So we got to keep, working on all these pieces together, so it does end up changing the society, and we don't continue to get D's on a report card, because that's just not what we need to be doing anywhere in the world. We have to move that needle. Guys, thank you so much. An absolute pleasure. I look forward to continuing this conversation. And I will possibly have you guys on again, because there's a whole systems change to happen here. And Johann, as we're building out more information around outcomes of implementation with rugby and so on, I want to get more into that again, because it's a powerful story.
Thanks for the invitation, Grace. It was great. And Amy, amazing conversations. Fascinating. Love that.
Great. Thank you, Johann. I enjoyed it. And Grace, thanks so much for the invitation.
Thank you guys for connecting the dots.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can connect the dots with others by sharing this podcast with colleagues and teammates. At wearethecollective.world, you can join a professional network, avail of professional development, and engage your support team. We collaborate on the shared pursuit for gender balance in health and business. Until next time, keep connecting the dots.